Welcome to The Film Angle. I'm Alex, and today I'm joined by the writer and director of the new short film, Key of Genius. Key of Genius is based on the true story of the blind, autistic musical savant, Derek Paravicini. You may have heard of him. It is adapted from the book The Key of Genius, which is the biography written by professor and piano teacher Adam Ockelford, which chronicles his life as Derek's mentor. And the film captures that journey of a young man who is born blind and autistic and discovered this extraordinary gift for music where he could listen to any kind of piece of music and pick it up almost within an instance. But my guest today is the writer and director of that film, Daniel Persitz. He's also been a producer and even developed several big Hollywood films. So he wrote this film as a feature film. It also has a writing credit with the writer of The King's Speech, David Seidler. And the idea behind this short film is to almost have it as a proof of concept, to bring in investors and develop that feature-length script into a feature film. And it's in development at the moment. So I'll discuss all of this with Daniel, as well as his kind of processes when it comes to adaptation and some of those kind of producing credits and how they've helped him along as well, and where he is in terms of getting this turned into a feature-length film. So without further ado, let's get into our interview with Daniel Persitz. Welcome to the show, Daniel Persitz.
Hello. Very glad to be here.
I'm glad. I'd love to get to know you a little bit more, Daniel, before we jump into your short film. How did you first kind of fall in love with film? How did you get into the medium?
Yeah, so I've loved movies all my life. And when I went to college, he was really the thing that sent me down the path. So I'm a lifelong violinist. I come from a family of classical musicians. And when I was in college, I played in the symphony orchestra, and we happened to have this incredible event on Halloween where the orchestra would pack the big hall on campus with like 3,000 drunk costume students on Halloween midnight. And then the students of the orchestra would make a film, project it in front of the audience, and then accompany it with movie scores and soundtracks and pieces of symphonies and things like that. So when I was a freshman in college, I had nothing to do with the movie except for playing in the orchestra, and I was like, this is like one of the greatest events I've ever been to. And at the end of the school year, everybody was talking about who is going to make next year's film, and nobody wanted to do it because it's an insane time commitment. Coming back to school in the fall, you have like a month and a half to put together, like a 25, 30-minute long film and figure out how you're orchestrating it. So I just agreed to do it because I remembered it being a fun event. And then over the summer was thinking to myself, wait, I have to make a movie. How do I make a movie? How do I do this? And just like got really deep into filmmaking. And, it was one of those things in college where like you're writing, shooting, editing, doing all the things, fortunately not acting in it, which is good. I spared the audience from putting me in front of the camera. But I think that got me hooked on the bug. Like I love the process. I think with my music background, the artistic creative side was very fulfilled, but I also am very technically minded. I've always really gravitated towards like the math and sciences. And I think the way that you edit a film and like technically put it together, like satisfied that part of my brain. And so I think the combination of those two things just worked as magic.
Oh, brilliant. And then how did you then decide to kind of pursue that as a career then?
Yeah, so I just, after college, decided to take the plunge, moved out to Los Angeles right after without a great plan besides just I want to work in the business. I'm originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is in the middle of the country and has nothing to do with the film industry. And so when I moved out, my first question was, how do movies even get made? How does this process work? Like, I made my little things in college, but what is this? And so initially my plan was to work for a bunch of very established production companies, learn from great directors and producers how these things work and how one gets a movie made and how one makes a movie, and then to set off on my own and do my own thing. And so that's exactly what I did. I was fortunate enough to work for the great director Robert Zemeckis, who did everything from Back to the Future to Forrest Gump, Castaway, a lot of great films. Worked for him for a number of years. Then I was a creative executive for Hasbro's movie studio. So I got to work on the Transformers movies, the G.I. Joe movies. I was a co-producer on Universal's Ouija movie, which is a thriller hit. And really started just to understand the business side of how things work and how do projects get set up and how do they get made. And all the while I was writing and directing shorts and things like that and getting to a point where I felt confident to strike out on my own and eventually did. And here we are.
Was the dream, whilst you were in the kind of producing roles, was it always to write and direct, or was it writing, directing? What was kind of the end goal in your brain as you were kind of making your way up?
Yeah, so if I were to rank them, directing first, and then writing second, the combination being the ideal for me. And I think in college I focused much more on the directing side, and I think by focusing a number of years for writing, when I left my executive jobs to set out on my own, I focused on writing for a few years, selling some projects. I was fortunate to set up a number of scripts at studios and things like that. And I think ultimately, hopefully, that makes me a better director, just in terms of going really deep into writing. And now I write things with the hope of directing them. So that's the idea.
Nice. I'd love to just know a little bit more about kind of the producer roles that you've been doing. What does that mean to kind of be a producer on some of these films? And then even in your time within development with Hasbro Studios, like what kind of insights are you getting into kind of the filmmaking process?
Yeah, so big studio movies have, as you've probably seen in credits, huge supplies of producers. And no two are alike. Different producers do different things on movies. There's line producers, which are on set, that are very focused on scheduling and budgeting and just organizing the machine of production. Then there are sometimes rights holding producers where they acquire a book or a graphic novel or what have you. In my case, we were the chief production company that were overseeing these projects from start to finish. So I had the fortunate position of working with in that case it was toy and game brands, figuring out, okay, how are we adapting these? Like, what are potential ways to tell these stories? Meeting with writers, developing scripts with writers, and then overseeing the projects through production and post-production. So, there was like a two-part thing to it where I loved being involved from start to finish, but at the same time, you are a small part of a larger machine when you're working on a studio movie. There's all those producers we just talked about. There's the writers, there's the directors, there's the cast. Then there's the whole studio side of things, which is like a whole different animal. And the bigger the movie, the more people there are involved. I think that's why, like, in my opinion, some of the hardest movies to make well are big studio movies, because there's just so many opinions and cooks in the kitchen on these things. And so being able to have that like singular vision and voice carry through from start to finish is very, very difficult. And the ones that do it well are, some of the great filmmakers of our time. But yeah, I think for me, like, it was, I was fortunate enough to be involved from start to finish with these things.
I guess, you're like you mentioned, you're working with kind of like IP brands like games and toys and stuff like that. And obviously your short film now is an adaptation of a feature script of a book. And I was interested developing those stories with kind of IP and stuff like that. Did that give you this sense of like, I like having like something to build off of? Or are there kind of original scripts you're like, no, I'm still dying for these to be read and seen?
Yeah, I mean, in my writing career, I've done both. I've adapted a number of projects and I've written originals. I like both. I find the adaptation process a little bit easier, but I'll say that with a caveat.
Sure.
It has to be the right source material. So adapting a toy or game where sometimes you have very, very little to go off is extremely challenging. If it's a great, great book that happens to lend itself to a film or a TV show, you're already off to the races in a really useful way. So in the case of Key of Genius, which, as you just mentioned, originated as a book called In the Key of Genius, written by Derek's lifelong teacher, Adam Ockelford, the book was fantastic. And while it didn't immediately lend itself to a movie because it covers a large piece of Derek's life, it really focuses on his first 18 years, and I don't think we could have packed that amount of time into a film. It did suggest a lot of things of what the film could be in terms of, which part of his life we could potentially focus on. What are some of the key interesting themes, ideas? Who are the characters in this piece? And of course, with any adaptation, there's, the source material, then there's liberties, and then there's everything in between. But this was really a case where there was a lot that was there and a lot to mine. And in this particular case, I really loved that because I felt that it gave me a huge leg up in the research phase of really understanding what I was working with. So by the time I went and met with Adam and Derek, and I'm getting maybe a little bit ahead of myself here.
No, you're
By
good.
the time I met with them, I had a really good, at least, foundation to work from at that point.
Gotcha. Well, I would love to get into kind of the whole process, especially like looking into some of the writing stuff. But maybe just for our audiences, do you want to let us know in your own words what the short film is about, and then I can really get into some of those kind of processes with you.
Sure. Yeah. So the one sentence version is Key of Genius is the incredible true story of a blind autistic boy and his lifelong music teacher. And getting into the weeds on a little bit, it's based on Derek Paravicini, who is a blind autistic pianist who was born in 1979, born into a very aristocratic British family, and was discovered by a piano teacher when he was touring a school for the blind in Wimbledon called the Linden Lodge School. And that first meeting led to Adam, who wrote the book, who is a teacher, becoming Derek's lifelong music teacher. And still to this day, when Derek performs all around the world, Adam usually travels with him. And the short focuses on those first few meetings between them. It takes place over the course of several piano lessons.
And as you mentioned, it was adapted from was it a biography or autobiography?
It was an autobiography written by Adam.
That's it, autobiography written by Adam. Did you read the book and say, all right, this could have some film in it, or did somebody send it to you and say, I think you're the right guy to write this?
So I tracked it down, and here was the genesis of it all. So my mom is a professional classical violinist. She's always sending me YouTube clips of musicians and various music things. So one day she sends me this clip about Derek. It had been taken from this American program, 60 Minutes. And in this little 5-minute clip, here's this guy who any piece of music he's ever heard in his life, he can instantly recall and play perfectly. And not just that, he can play it in any key and in any style. So you could say, hey, play the Beethoven Moonlight Sonata in a Louis Armstrong jazz style, and on the spot he can do it. So I watched this video, and honestly, it didn't seem real to me. It seemed like this was a made-up parlor trick, that there's no human has such a superhuman ability. So dug in a little bit, discovered that there was a book, in fact, written about him. Got the book, read the book, loved it, and what really struck me about it, which this is what made me feel it was a movie, it almost felt like a underdog sports story of like the coach finding the player that nobody believed in, and the two of them moving on to greatness, sort of in the most basics of senses. So at that point I was hooked, especially because of my music background. I was like, this is a great story. It's about music. I feel like I know this and breathe this. How do I get the rights to this? So I did a little research about Adam, stalked him online, figured out that he's a professor in London, found his email address, shot him an email, and within a few days, we were chatting via Zoom or FaceTime, one of these things. And I just said, look, I fell in love with his book. I think it can be a movie. I explained my movie background as well as my music background. And he thought it all sounded really great. We put together a very basic agreement. And then I started working on the screenplay. And at the time, this whole project existed as a feature screenplay way before I made the short. So I first wrote the feature script with a writing partner. And Adam was really helpful in the entire process. Once I completed the draft, I actually flew out to London to meet him and Derek for the first time. I brought my violin with me with the idea of playing a little duet with Derek. I'd prepared a few pieces and asked Adam, do you think he knows these? And Adam just said, start playing, see what happens.
Yeah, he will.
And within a few seconds of me playing these few pieces, Derek just joined in and started playing because he had heard them once upon a time and just knew how to do it. It was amazing. I was like, I'd put so much work into these pieces and practiced them and all this stuff, and he just busted out and can do it. It's amazing. And Adam had read the first draft. He had a lot of great notes on it. And he and Derek have been fantastic collaborators in this entire process. And I wouldn't have it any other way, because their involvement just lends so much authenticity to this whole thing. And from the very first day, for me, the most important thing was to do their story justice. And so, yeah, I've involved them at every step of the way, from development and through production, everything.
That's amazing. Have you ever kind of, because I guess there's always an element with films, especially when you're adapting like real life people's stories. Is there ever an element of like, there has to be a little bit of creativity here because it needs to work as a film? That might not have been exactly what it was in real life. Did you butt heads with these guys at all in the process?
I mean, there was a little bit of that. I was very clear with Adam up front, and then when I sent him the script, I basically said, look, none of this is precious. There's some things in there where you'll be like, hey, I didn't live this, but let's talk about it. And to his credit, he was very, very flexible and open-minded about those things. As long as we stayed true to the essence of his experience with Derek, I think he was very open. And we haven't really butted heads. There are certainly some things, especially in the feature screenplay, that are, I would say embellishments on the story. They're not, crazy exaggerations or things like that. Of course, but, things that help the movie work overall. And Adam gets it, I think he really understands it. So I feel really lucky about that.
And throughout this whole time, you'd purchased the rights then off of Adam?
So I had gotten what's called a shopping agreement, which gave me a period of time to write the script and then shop it around to various buyers and studios. So what happened from that is my reps, my agent, had started to send the script out to some potential buyers and producers and things like that. And people started really falling in love with the script. It landed on, do you know about the Hollywood blacklist?
Yes.
Do you know about this? Yeah, so we were fortunate enough to land on the Hollywood blacklist that year. So that means that there were a number of executives that had read it, loved it, thought it was one of their favorite unproduced screenplays of the year. And that allowed the script to get optioned by E1 Studios. And so then at that point, E1 optioned my script. They optioned Adam's book, as well as, I believe, his and Derek's life rights. And we were off to the races developing the project. And so initially with Adam, back to your original question, I had gotten a shopping agreement that essentially allowed me to get it to that stage.
Brilliant. So you have this feature script, and now you have made a short film. I guess this is all part of the process of trying to get financiers on board with the film to produce and actually make the full-length feature film. What was the mindset when it came to adapting this into a short film? Have you taken a chunk from the feature-length script, or are you almost giving us a flavor of what the feature film could be?
Yes, so it's a bit of both, actually. So my two goals in making this short were, number one, first and foremost, to make a great standalone short that people can watch by itself, enjoy from start to finish, full, complete story start to finish. Great, so check that box. Secondly, as a proof of concept for the feature, right? So as if you like this, there's way more here, Yeah. So it's a complete story, but hopefully we've whet your appetite and you want to know more. And to that end, what I did was I took several scenes that exist in the feature screenplay and essentially arranged them in the short. It does tell a slightly different story, so there are some things in the short that are not in the feature, but it does borrow very heavily from scenes that are in the feature. And in shaping it into a complete story.
Gotcha. You also had a writing partner on the film, David, is it Seidler or Seidler?
Seidler.
David
Yes.
Seidler, yes, who is the Oscar-winning writer of The King's Speech. Was he involved with the short or the feature or both?
Yes. So David Seidler, who is brilliant and unfortunately, sadly, passed away last year. But I was very fortunate that I got to work with him. So what happened was when we set the project up at E1 Studios, they said, we love the script. We'd love to make it even more authentically British, as you can probably tell. I'm not from England. Yeah, so they felt, can we make this a little bit more authentically British and give it even more of that awards prestige feel to it?
Mm-hmm.
And listen, when you're a writer, you never want to get another writer involved. Like, you want to be the writer. But in this case, I actually agreed with them. And I said, can I have a say in who those writers are that we send the script to and try to get on board? They said, sure, send us your list. So I sent them a list of 5 writers. And David Seidler was at the top of that list. King's Speech is one of my favorite movies. The way it handles a disability story and the work that goes into, I wouldn't even say overcoming it. At the end, he hasn't fully solved his problem for life, but he has figured out ways to manage it and work with it. It felt like a very real portrayal, very realistic. And that combined with the way that film deals with the class disparity. So on the one hand, you have the king, and then on the other hand, you have the speech therapist, who's much more, blue collar. And their dynamic is very reminiscent of what we did with the Key of Genius feature script, because Derek does come from a very aristocratic British family. His aunt is actually Queen Camilla. No joke. So, quite upper crust. And then Adam, he's a music teacher, very much more kind of a, working class type person. And so there were a lot of clashes of those first few lessons when Adam would enter Derek's big estate where he was managed by a nanny, all that class disparity stuff. So the way David had handled that so brilliantly in King's Speech, I felt, this could be really great for this project. So he was brought on board. I had the chance to work very closely with him. Until the end of his life, he was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I drove out there and visited with him, and we had a great time together. He was just such a fantastic partner in all of it. So yes, very, very involved with the feature script. And then I would, to a lesser degree with the short, since the short does borrow from scenes from the feature to that extent, yes, I would say he's involved, but not in terms of actually making it.
Yeah, gotcha. Did he give you any advice that kind of shifted how you saw your original script at all?
He really leaned into the class piece, and also he unlocked a bit more of the story with Derek's parents. In a way that the original screenplay, they were in the story, but it was a much more secondary or even tertiary story. And he really felt that there was a lot of emotion to mine there, in terms of, here you have these people who have so much wealth and power, and they're used to really living the lives that they want to, and all of a sudden they have this disabled child that, you can't solve that issue with money and power. How do you deal with that? And so there's a lot of great emotion that he was able to extract and mine from that. And the short certainly has a piece of that with the mother.
Yes, yeah. You definitely captured that kind of dusty British, state school there in the short. I think that was great. I was interested to know if you came to England to develop and film this, or was this in America? And you've the same way that we have set up Glasgow to look like New York. Is it? have you set up somewhere in the US to look like a London school?
For the short film, we did. Yes, we shot in Southern California. We had a British production designer. That was really important for me, so that I was like, this needs to look like 1980s London. How do we do that? And we
nailed it, by the way. Nailed it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that. Certainly, I had visited London a few times in terms of researching Adam and Derek. I also did go to the Linden Lodge School and got to see what it actually looks like still to this very day. So I had a sense of that. But having a British production designer was very helpful. And we went and we saw a lot of schools, and there were a number of schools where it was just, no, this would never pass. And then we found the right school that just, it had the right level of brick and just the look and the feel. And yeah, we were able to make that happen. For the feature, which we're, in the process of putting together, the hope would be to go to the UK to shoot that.
Nice. I'm interested as well. Derek is blind and autistic, and you're portraying him in the early stages of his life. That casting process can't have been the easiest. How do you approach finding somebody who can step into his role? You want somebody who can capture his spirit, his essence, but also you are looking for somebody who can resemble him as well. Can you talk a little bit about the casting for Derek?
Yes, this was always the biggest challenge and the most important to making the whole thing work. So what I did was I brought on this casting director. Her name is Daniel Persitz, and she very much specializes in casting underrepresented communities and particularly children. And so I shared this story with her. She fell in love with it, and I said, "How do we cast this role? How do we do it? How do we find this kid?" And she said, "Look, it's a really difficult role to find. We shouldn't just cast in LA because that's too limiting. We should do a nationwide search across the United States." So she put out a big call, not just looking at agents and managers, but also Facebook groups, parent groups, things like that. And so we found this boy, Cannon Wood, in Ohio, of all places, which also, very much middle of the country, not LA or New York type of place. He was born with Nori disease, which left him blind from a very, very young age. And he didn't have too much acting experience up until that point. Very little, honestly. Didn't know how to play the piano. But the way we ran the auditions is I did them over Zoom, and as you've seen in the film, and this is true to Derek as a kid, he was fairly nonverbal for a long time. He'd make little mutterings and sounds and things. He wasn't really speaking as a child until a little bit later when he developed this thing called echolalia, when he would repeat what people would say. And then later on, it got to a point where, you could speak and answer questions and things like that. But this was a case where I knew that we were focusing on a time in his life where he wasn't really speaking much. So what the role really demanded was the mannerisms, the behaviors, all of those types of things. Mm-hmm. So over Zoom, what I did with the audition process was I would just throw prompts at these kids, that were auditioning of, can you act this way? Can you move your head around this way? And I would try to describe it as well as I could, because we were auditioning a lot of blind or visually impaired children. Mm-hmm. And in the case of Cannon, who we cast, he just had great instincts for these behaviors, and on top of that, just took direction brilliantly. Like I would give him a note and he would just do it. And we met several times because it's a big rolling of the dice to cast him and then fly him out from Ohio and do all these things, but eventually it felt like he was the right kid. So that was part one. Then we put him in touch with Adam and Derek over Zoom so that he could work really closely with them, particularly with Adam, who very clearly remembered what Derek was like and could describe for Cannon what those behaviors were really like. And Adam has worked with a lot of blind children over the years beyond just Derek. And so the piano piece became also very helpful from that side. So Cannon had never played piano in his life before, and certainly I knew that we were never going to get to a place where he could brilliantly play all these piano pieces. So I always knew we would have to cast a piano playing double for him, or we could do close-ups of hands and things like that. But at the same time, we needed him to be comfortable around a piano, at least to the point where he could walk up to it, find some keys, and play a few simple things. So over Zoom, he met with Adam a number of times. His mother back in Ohio figured out that his grandmother had a piano in her house, so he would go there on weekends and on evenings and just sit down and familiarize himself with the keys. He would Zoom with Adam and do these piano lessons somehow where by the time he came out to California, like he was pretty comfortable around a piano. At least enough that we could shoot with him. And so there was a lot of prep involved in getting there, but I think you saw in the film, like he was the right kid. He was just so brilliant and was able to capture that essence.
Yeah, absolutely, and you do a great thing in the film as well, where you almost have like a POV from Derek's point of view as well, where the cinematography kind of changes and there's a lot of sound design in there, and obviously music plays a very integral part to the film as well. But I was wondering what kind of your relationship with your cinematographer is, because you are kind of developing those shots at the same time you are working with actors, or at least Canon there who doesn't know how to play piano exactly like Derek would, and you're having to kind of think around shots of how we can hide that, and through movie magic it is seamless. So what was that kind of collaboration like, and how did you guys get into it?
Yeah, so Ed Wu, our cinematographer, is so brilliant, and when we first sat down, I said, okay, Derek is blind, so we can't really do that as a POV, because then it's just over black. I mean, I suppose you could do it, but it's not particularly cinematic. But how do you get that feeling of like what he's going through? And a lot of this came out of talking to Adam and Derek about their experiences together. And there's one thing that Adam said that really unlocked a lot of this idea for me. He started to talk about the way that Derek hears things, and it's almost like describing a superpower. So he truly hears everything around him. So if we're sitting in a cafe, for example, he's hearing every conversation around us. He's hearing the coffee machine. He's hearing cars outside driving by. He's hearing the music that's playing on the speakers. He's hearing, every little thing around him. And that, of course, can be quite overwhelming, right? If you're surrounded by that much sound, it's just sensory overload. But what I love about understanding that is it also explains the superhuman ability, because if you can focus all of that into one area, which in his case is the piano, he can hear like nobody else, and then he can do things like nobody else. So talking to Ed about the cinematography is like, how can we get that feeling of like you're in with him and close, and your senses are heightened. And so, yeah, camera-wise, we got in really, really, really close with Canon for some of these shots. And then sound design-wise, we do a lot with when he first hears thing, like there's almost like a 3D sound type of thing that we do. So I think that plus what the camera is doing gives you a little bit of that feeling of just the immediacy of what Derek feels when he enters a new environment and hears things.
Yeah, no, it's a really nice moment in the short, or moments, should I say. Is that something you want to bring along to the feature as well, that kind of visual style?
Definitely. Yeah, and even more of that.
Yeah.
I'm really glad I did the short, because in some ways it was just great R&D for the feature, I have a really good idea of how casting for a movie like this works now, how the music part of it works, because the piano playing double stuff, we did a lot of trickery there that's just not evident when you watch it. And as a musician, nothing bothers me more than seeing a movie where the music doesn't look authentic. It's just, when that happens in a film, I'm like, I'm ready to turn it off, or walk out of the theater or whatever it is. So, yeah, there were a lot of tricks that we learned along the way, and stylistically that we figured out that 100% I'd want to apply to the feature.
Yeah, I guess as well with those kind of musical moments, it helps that you're a musician yourself and you kind of understand those things. How did you kind of pick the pieces of music that obviously move this film along, and obviously music plays an integral part to the overall vibe and feel of the film as well? So, and this was I think an area where working on the feature was very helpful. I have gone down a very, very deep rabbit hole of talking to Adam and Derek about all the major pieces he played as a kid or heard as a kid. And of course, I don't have the full list, but I have a good understanding from Adam's book, as well as speaking with them, what some of the really key pieces were along the way. And his musical evolution is really interesting. He started by learning mostly classical pieces, as most pianists do. But he
gravitated more and more towards jazz later on. I think largely because of his ability to improvise. So in the short film, we don't have a lot of time to really explore all of those styles. In the future, we do. So I knew I wanted to keep it more classical because that was true to his upbringing and his childhood. So the first few pieces that we hear him play are all pieces that he played as a kid. And then the big piece that happens in the final scene is Elgar's Enigma Variations, which is one of my favorite pieces of music. Obviously, a very famous piece there in England. And that for me was always really important to honor that classical tradition, but also honor British composers in this piece. And in the future, there's a lot more. We get into William Walton and Benjamin Britten, and I think this is where I get to really geek out as a classical musician. Like some of my favorite composers, but really focusing on the place, which I think helps sell the idea of it taking place in London. Because we're playing British composers and things like that. So yeah, for the short, it was focusing on his classical music favorites, plus a great piece of British music.
Nice. Neurodiversity and inclusion are kind of at the heart of Key of Genius, being able to kind of understand somebody who may not have the vocal capabilities to be able to say what they think or feel. I was interested to know, what do you hope audiences take away from this film, specifically in regards to kind of the neurodiverse communities?
So the big takeaway for me, and this is actually true in the future as well, that I really learned, I think, reading Adam's book and then speaking to him and Derek, is this idea that music is Derek's language. He can speak, he can answer questions, but music is really where he communicates. When he sits down at a piano, like he is talking to you, he's talking to a room, and the way he lights up in front of an audience, like that's his megaphone. That's how he communicates with the world. And this idea that I think those of us that are perhaps less neurodivergent, we take for granted that we speak to people in a language, but that's not necessarily the language that everybody speaks in. In Derek's case, it is music. And so what this story is all about, which I hope audiences take away, is that people do communicate in different quote-unquote languages, and sometimes you have to really spend a little bit of extra time to figure out what somebody else's language is and meet them there.
Have you screened the film yet? Because I know you're very early days in a way in kind of your festival run. I don't know if you've screened the film for kind of any neurodiverse or maybe even blind communities or visually impaired communities, or maybe you've had somebody in the audience come up to you and tell you about something. Have you had any responses like that yet?
So we've had some members of those communities at some of our festival screenings and have invited groups like that. So we've screened. We had our world premiere at the Cleveland International Film Festival, which is an Oscar qualifying festival. Then we had our international premiere at Raindance in London, and at that screening, Derek got to attend with Adam as well as members of their family and other members of the blind community, neurodivergent community, like people that know about Derek or are in that community. And for that screening, we created closed captions and audio description for the film. Like from day one, that was always the idea, because we want the biggest audience to be able to enjoy this film and experience this film. And at the Raindance screening, we actually were able to do audio description for the people in the audience that wanted to experience it that way. So Derek had a pair of headphones on, getting the audio description. There was another blind woman that was there that really, they were so appreciative, because it's usually not something that they're able to do. It's usually something they're able to do at home, but not in a movie theater. So we were able to do it there. And we've had a few screenings like that and some responses like that along the way that are so meaningful. And of course, when we've had like a private screener link for people that worked on the film. So Cannon has been able to enjoy the audio description as well. He was at the Cleveland screening, so he got to experience it with an audience. And then there are two kids that are in the short film, somewhat in the background of one of the school scene, who are, Yeah, they're visually impaired, and so they've been able to experience the film with audio description as well. So, yeah, that part of inclusion and accessibility is so important to this film. And yeah, my hope is that more and more of these festivals where we're playing allow us the option to being able to screen that way.
That's amazing. That's amazing. How has the festival run been so far?
I mean, it's been great. Yeah. So Cleveland, Rain Dance in London. Then we had a crazy screening in LA at the Holly Shorts Film Festival at the Chinese Theater, which is one of the greatest theaters in the world. It was sold out, and it was like a mad mob of people trying to get into the theater. I've never seen anything like it, especially not for short films. And the response there was just insane, like in the best possible way. People loved the movie. There were so many people coming up to me afterwards, talking about the music. There were some teachers in the audience that felt that like this really spoke to them as teachers. So the festival run's been great. We had another screening at the LA Diversity Film Festival. We have screenings coming up in Pittsburgh, in Belgium, kind of all over the world, which is so fantastic. We do have a screening happening this week in London as well. That's happening on Thursday of this week. Derek and Adam will be there. Our executive producer Sandro Manetti will be there. Lauren Samuels, who plays Derek's mom, will be there. So yeah, we have a bunch of screenings, and yeah, just trying to show this thing to as many people as possible.
Brilliant. Do you still work in development and producing then? Are you doing this are you having to juggle the two at the moment?
To some extent, sure. Like I am continuing to write and sell screenplays and things like that with the goal of, directing. I have taken on some producing projects here and there. And I find for me, there are some people that they're just writers. They love to write movies, be in a room by themselves, and just like write out a screenplay, turn it in, and then write the next thing. I'm not that person at all. I like the collaboration. I like making stuff, honestly. I like being on set. Some people find production to be hell, which it can be. You have long days and a lot of unpredictable elements, but I thrive in that environment. I love it. And so I think the producing experience that I've had really helps that piece when I'm on set. I try not to overproduce myself as a director, to some extent, I have to be able to focus on the creative, but usually when I'm shooting, things are on time and we're able to make our days and things like that, which I think the producer hat helps with that.
At least you have an awareness, I guess, which probably helps in terms of when you're directing to know, all right, this would actually really help if I kept this under budget, or if I was on time today. Yes,
exactly.
So you've also been to kind of short film festivals like Holly Shorts, which are Oscar qualifiers, and I guess at the end of the day, you want as many people to see this film, but you also want people to invest in this film. Are you hoping to kind of move towards potentially becoming a contender for the Academy Awards? Is that something that is kind of a dream, or are you just, or is it more important to get the film made? Where are you juggling the two?
I mean, why not do both, right? By the way, it would be amazing to be considered for the Academy Award. I think largely for me, it's really about sharing this story with as many people as possible, and that's obviously such a great platform for getting the word out. That for me has always been the goal with this thing, which I think applies to both the awards and the feature. It's that this is such a powerful story. Not enough people know about it. And I think what it has to say about communication is it's just really important and moving for people. And so, yes, I'm very moved to, at least be potentially considered and to move forward with that and see what voters think of the film. It would be incredible, but yeah, I see it as all related things, actually.
And where are you in terms of getting this made into a feature? How are things looking? How are things running?
We have a few financiers that are coming on board that saw the short, really fell in love with it, wanted to know if there was more, learned about the feature project. So there's somebody in the UK that's helping us out right now. There's somebody in New York that's helping us out. I think we'll need to put together probably a few more pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, we're moving towards a potential production date next spring. So yeah, we're all building towards that.
Brilliant. That's amazing. That's amazing. Are you looking to direct that feature as well?
Yes.
Yeah,
that is an essential thing. I'm too tied up in this story at this point. Yeah, it's. I think also Adam and Derek wouldn't trust anybody else at this point because they've seen how I honor their story. So, and I would just be too afraid of somebody messing up the music stuff, to be honest. So I can't let this one go.
Yeah, keep hold of it. That's great. That's great. And then I guess like from directing a short film, and you have directed a couple of short films prior to this as well, but moving to directing a feature would be your first, if I'm right in thinking.
It would. Yes.
What are you hoping to bring from your process, from your journey directing short films into feature films? Like, is there a specific way of doing things that you want to keep hold of as you kind of develop it in this bigger world?
So yes, to answer your question, I think this is where my producing hat comes into play. I think a lot of these films, particularly lower budget ones, like a short film or like the feature version, which is going to be an independent movie, they're largely successful based on how good the prep is for them. Like if you're too shortchanged on the prep, you have no chance of success. You have to have enough time to cast it right, prep those actors, get the music stuff ready, so that by the time you're on your first day of set, everything is set. There's no guesswork. And yes, you can find great moments. You can have actors improvise on top of what you're already doing, but you have a very, very, very robust plan. So for me, the feature lives or dies based on that. It needs to have enough prep time once we're officially going to do it all right and set it up correctly.
And in terms of prep time, like how many years have you been developing this for now?
Yeah, I mean, development wise, there's no shortage. No, but I'm talking about like actual boots on the ground, location scouting, figuring out shots, like the casting process, and the acting, the rehearsals with the actors for this. I learned a lot working with Canon on what it's like working with a blind child on set, and there's just like so many things you don't think about until you're there doing it. Okay, when he comes into a room for the first time, how does he find his way around? Well, he feels in front of him, and how Derek, when he was a kid, like he would do that, but he would sometimes charge into a room and crash into things. Like his nanny called him Bumpy because he would just be bumping into things. And while that's great visually, it's not the safest thing to do on a set with a blind child actor, right? So there's a lot of that kind of prep where you have to like make sure you can get them into a space, get them familiar with the space, and then have them act on top of it to act as if they're unfamiliar with it. But like, just from a production safety perspective, there's a lot of things to consider there. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are necessary in terms of the actual preparation time with the actors and the locations and all of that.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure you have a lot of it mapped out in your mind, ready to go, and just need to get going now, which I wish you all the best with. So we have a bit of a running tradition on the show where we ask this final question to all the filmmakers we interview. So one of the series that we've been doing on the film angle is our blind spots on the Sight and Sound greatest films of all time list, and through looking at all these films, we've seen a lot of them that are favorites of filmmakers and critics, and you start to see how some of these older films have influenced some of the more modern films, and how they've kind of shaped filmmakers that we love. So I wanted to know maybe not what your favorite films are, although there is a crossover. Maybe some of the films that have shaped or influenced the kind of films that you wish to make or have made so far.
Great question. Such a big question. All right, give me a second.
That's all right.
To map this out. Like I'm thinking like 20 films right now, so I need to narrow it down a little bit. Okay, let me rephrase your question a little bit, just so I can help myself answer it a little bit. So, what are the films that I was thinking about that I love that were instrumental to Key of Genius and perhaps some other stories that I have written recently and I'm looking to write.
Yeah.
So one of them is actually the Pixar movie Up. The first 20 minutes of that, where there's essentially no dialogue. It's all just music, and it's the most emotional thing. Like, it gets me crying every time. That for me as a musician, and as a visual storyteller is the bar. You know, if you can move people like that without saying a single word, I mean, that's everything for me. And without spoiling Key of Genius for people who've seen it, the last scene tries to do some version of that. So that's a great one. I've often talked about this film being a mashup. I hate sometimes when people do mashups, but this one I think fits for this one. That this movie is a mashup of Whiplash and Rain Man. So Whiplash is so authentically in that world of music and the competitive stakes of it, and just the visceral nature of playing an instrument. Rain Man is obviously, you know, Dustin Hoffman plays an autistic guy, and that movie was really, I think, so foundational for putting autism into the public consciousness as like a thing to talk about. Prior to that, people weren't really talking about autism as much, and that plays into Key of Genius a bit. One of the things that was very interesting about Derek growing up, because he was both blind and autistic, it took his parents a very long time to figure out that they were dealing with autism. Some of his learning deficiencies and things like that, they thought was because he was blind. They didn't know. People weren't really talking about autism back then. It was pre-Rain Man. And so that movie really got people talking about it. And clearly now, you know, it's something we talk about much more. So I would say those are foundational. King's Speech, which we're coming back to, was certainly a foundational part of it, and so awesome to have the writer of that involved with this. Just because what I love about that story and what I tried to do with this story is, so while Derek has these incredible gifts and sometimes people refer to as a savant-like abilities, what was so important to me about the Adam story with him is it did not undersell how much work and hard practice went into getting him to the piano playing level that he is today. Like, he was born, yes, with certain gifts, but I don't think he would have been a concertizing pianist had he and Adam not worked so tirelessly for so many years together. So King's Speech, I think, gets into that a bit of just all the hard work that it took and all the just creative problem solving it took to get him to a point where he could just deliver a speech, right? Like, it doesn't solve his problem for life, but it gets him to a point where he can deliver this really important speech over the radio waves. So yeah, I would say that's maybe my Venn diagram of films I was thinking about with this film. And yeah, I think I reference those a lot when I am thinking about other movies. I think I gravitate towards movies that have like an important message, and at the end of the day, I think a more uplifting ideal. You know, I enjoy dark, bleak movies, but I don't know that I would ever write one, or at least not at this stage of my life.
Yes, you want to have that kind of emotional, moving uplift. You know, something to take away from the film, rather than obviously there's something to a sad film and a dark film as well. But yes, I appreciate we're much more willing to sit down with a film that kind of leaves you a little bit more positive at the end of it.
Right, or like Up, like it's really sad for large chunks of that movie. Like, it pulls at your heartstrings, but ultimately, you know, that there's a pun intended uplifting nature to it. Definitely, and the start is so sad, but then the rest of the film is almost like a therapy session, isn't it, on grief along the way? So, yeah. But we do remember the start because, you know, that opening 20 minutes is incredible. It can't be helped. That's right. Yeah.
Nice one. Well, Daniel, thank you for joining us on the show today. Thank you for giving us your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was great to meet you and speak with you.
Thank you. Wish you all the best with turning it into a feature.
Appreciate it.
Thank you again to Daniel there for his time. Key of Genius is a really, really lovely film. that kind of chronicles, at least within the short film element, the kind of very early years of Derek Paravicini's life and kind of his initial kind of meeting and development with Adam Ockelford, his piano mentor and teacher. It's a really lovely film, and I hope it gets turned into a feature film. You can definitely see all of it there. Like it's you watch the short film and you can kind of see where the feature would come out of this. So I wish Daniel all the best with that. He mentioned it's screening in London, which would be tomorrow. On the release of this is on a Wednesday, and he said it was in London on a Thursday. So if you're going, give it a watch. And yeah, it's a really interesting short film. I highly recommend, and hopefully we'll see it on the big screen in the not too distant future. So that has been the episode for this week. If you've enjoyed it, make sure to leave us a 5-star rating or review. We do really appreciate it. And if you'd like to keep up to date with us, make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Film Angle. We also have a Film Angle playlist, so if you want to listen to what we listen to, you can find that in the show notes. Be sure to catch us next week for more cinematic discussions. Goodbye.